These are the main developments.
Yugoslavia says the truce to mark the Christian Easter holiday is a goodwill gesture and proves its will to resolve the Kosovo crisis. It's called for peace talks to restart immediately. The negotiations would include a ceasefire in Kosovo and the return of refugees.
The reaction from NATO countries was swift and brief. The White House said the bombing would continue, and Downing Street said the offer doesn't go far enough. Nothing short of NATO's declared aims will do.
Earlier, Serb television claimed 5 civilians were killed when missiles fell on a block of flats. NATO says a rogue bomb might have fallen short, but France has already warned that Yugoslavia now faces the biggest night of attacks so far. Forecasters are predicting fine weather, and another US battle fleet has arrived in the Adriatic.
We start with Yugoslavia's ceasefire declaration. Vuk Draskovic, the Deputy Prime Minister of Serbia, explained to Sky News why they'd called the truce.
Because we are approaching the Christmas, Orthodox Christmas, and from today our government made a decision to promote a unilateral ceasefire, and after that immediately to call up all refugees.
Footage we've seen lately about what have they suffered. They will never trust to go back there while the Serbian troops are there.
Do you think that by offering a ceasefire at the moment, it does suggest that they may no longer, the Yugoslav government may no longer fear the threat of the KLA, that they may have done sufficient damage to the Kosovo Liberation Army, that they feel they can stop that activity against them?
No, I don't think so. You see, in Bosnia, they have signed 37 ceasefires. They have broke every single one of them. He has not targeted his troops against KLA as much as he has done that against civilian population. He wanted and he still wants to ethnically cleanse Kosovo. He knows that sooner or later, with 90% of population Albanian, he has to give up Kosovo. And I'm afraid that now he has killed the Rambouillet agreement. I don't think any Albanian would now accept to live under any kind of Serbian sovereignty in that region.
Not long ago, Ibrahim Rugova was seen as the democratically elected leader of the Kosovar people, and he was certainly somebody who was talked seriously to by all the governments now involved in the NATO alliance. Belgrade says that they are negotiating with him. What do you make of that?
Well, what I'm saying is that he's on the hands of people who are committing genocide. He's on the hands of criminals. And while he's on those hands, we won't expect anything else to come from that. If Milosevic wants Rugova to address his own people, he has to let him go. He said that he would not let him go to the NATO countries because he would allegedly be kidnapped by NATO leaders. But if that's the case, let him go to Switzerland.
Do you have any evidence that he is speaking under duress?
Of course he is speaking under duress. You must realize that the last statement he gave without pressure was 2 days before he was arrested to Der Spiegel, and he said if Milosevic does not bend from airstrikes, NATO should totally destroy Serbia. That was his last statement he gave without any duress. Now, whatever he says while he's on their hands means nothing to Albanians. He is our leader, we respect him as our leader, but for his words to mean anything to us, he has to get out of the country with his family, to undergo medical check. We don't know what they are capable of. They are capable of doing anything. These are criminals. They're the same fascists as we've seen them during the Second World War.
Does anybody really speak for the Kosovar nation at the moment who who can stand up, be counted, who can sit down at talks?
Yes, most of the people from delegation from Rambouillet, they are outside of the country. So we can set up a delegation to speak for Albanians. No, that wouldn't be a problem. But for any talks,
are you ever going to better sit down with this Serbian Yugoslav leadership though and talk sensibly?
Of course we will. When they withdraw all their troops from Kosovo, they have to withdraw. You see, in this conflict, there cannot be middle way now. Milosevic has to totally capitulate. He has to withdraw all his troops. It's the same as saying that you should have found an agreement with Hitler in 1945. You cannot. He has gone too far now. The things have gone too far. He has to totally withdraw his troops from Kosovo.
Bayram Gerçek, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, the plight of Kosovo's refugees is found. People in Kosovo have been displaced from their homes. That's from a population of 1.8 million. 135,000 are already in Macedonia, with 65,000 waiting on the border near Blace, and a further 100,000 moving south from Pristina. Over in the west, 220,000 people have poured into Albania, with at least another 50,000 waiting to cross the border. 62,000 refugees have made it to Montenegro, as you can see from our graphic there, with another 100,000 waiting and hoping to join them. Well, despite Yugoslavia's offer to return home, many say they're too scared to go back without international protection. Sky's Ross Appleyard is at the Albania border of Kukës and sends us this report now.
The refugees are still wondering when their misery will ever come to an end. The announcement from Belgrade failed to lift their battered spirits.
First, all Yugoslavian army and paramilitary forces got to be out of Kosovo.
Hit! Never win, hit. You
Can believe on Milosevic's words, because he kept all the time the same fashion, declared different toward the rest of the world and act in different way toward us. As you can see, forced them, killed, robbed, burning houses, destruct everything.
Every day brings new horrors, each story more graphic, more poignant and more distressing. Many people here are from Jakovica, one of the worst affected towns. 10-year-old Dreni Chaka was there when Serb troops moved in.
Seeing just a lot of not good things here.
The 8 helicopters are now coming in thick and fast. But there's a danger of disease running wild in the makeshift camps. This woman was taken away from the area with suspected hepatitis. Many more people are trying to get into this camp, but the Red Cross Field Hospital is not quite ready. When it is, there will be a clamour for places. But with tens of thousands of people waiting for help, the vast majority are bound to be disappointed. Ross Appleyard, Sky News, Albania.
And we cross straight to Washington.
Well, I think if that is his intention, he will be sorely disappointed. It is my understanding, I will let the Secretary General speak and make his own statement, but we believe that there is, that the NATO allies believe this is not sufficient to end the campaign, and there is unity and support for moving forward until we've met our military objectives.
You don't think that any of the other NATO countries, European countries especially, will want to try to talk with him at this point?
I think if you look at the statement that the foreign ministers put out over the weekend, they clearly spelled out what Milosevic needs to do. Any statements they've made today, which again are only statements, are clearly not sufficient to meet those requirements.
How is NATO going to secure the objectives which you've just laid out, including the return of the Kosovars who've been expelled, without using a ground force at some point to do something, even if it's just to guard against a re-entry of Milosevic?
Well, we've always said that in the aftermath of a political settlement and in a permissive environment, NATO ground troops would be there to implement this political settlement.
Sure. But wait a second, my question is, I gave you an out at the last phrase. Let me take out back the last phrase. How's the president going to do it if the bombing
campaign... Can we roll yesterday's tape for a minute?
Because the question is still there. There's a rising support, according to the polls, in the American public for the use of ground forces.
Correct.
In other countries, it's already there. How are you going to do it if the air campaign doesn't succeed?
Well, let me just say this. We are in the second week of an air campaign that we are confident will succeed. We are going to continue to hit him methodically and relentlessly and diminish his grip over Kosovo, and we believe in the end we will succeed.
So if you won't take them at their word with what they say now, why would you take them at their word if, say, a week or 2 weeks from now they say they will agree with NATO's demands? Can you trust them, period? Will you do
Well, again, this is not an issue of trust. It's an issue of seeing what happens on the ground. And this will get serious when we see troops being withdrawn and meeting the conditions that have been laid out.
Ground troops in a non-permissive...
that is correct.
What exactly do you have to see to say, okay, we accept that and we'll stop?
Well, we think that he knows what he needs to do, and he knows what we need to see, which is... let me reiterate it again. We need to see withdrawal of his military, police, and paramilitary forces from Kosovo. We need to see an acceptance for the deployment of an international security force. which we believe will make it possible for refugees to return, and then all of which, and we need an agreement for a multi-ethnic democratic Kosovo.
Part of the Rambouillet agreement allowed him to keep 5,000 troops on the ground. You still want him to do
Part of the agreement was providing for some border troops. I'm not going to get into negotiating here any provisions. Oh, I'm talking about withdrawing, without getting into any kind of negotiation from here. I'm talking about withdrawing the troops that have been wreaking the havoc and brutal atrocities on Kosovo over the last several weeks.
Keep some there.
Again, we say we want him to withdraw his forces. I'm not going to get into what he can or can't do around the border.
The President today and the Secretary of State, and now you have said an international security force. Right. Is this new language? Do we still mean NATO-led peacekeepers?
Yes, we still mean a NATO-led force.
Joe, can you take this at least as a sign of progress, that he's maybe willing somewhere along the line to negotiate? And why do you think he did this? Is he starting to hurt?
I have no idea. It would be impossible for me to get inside his thinking. It is certainly a possibility that the effect of the 2-week-old air campaign had some impact on his thinking. But it is not sufficient. You don't have a deal until you have a deal, so I'm not going to try to look at this as some sort of sense of progress.
Joe, this just in.
Yeah.
The Yugoslav deputy foreign minister has told one of our people that the ceasefire is permanent. Now, what does that mean in terms of what
I think I answered. I'll try again, which is whether it's permanent or temporary, it's not sufficient. It does not meet the demands that the President, the Secretary of State, and NATO have laid down for bringing an end to these hostilities.
Would the ceasefire change NATO-U.S. strategy in any way, affect any element of the current?
No, I think the military campaign will continue. Let me try the back, and I'll come back up to the front.
Joe, a question about refugees. You said yesterday, I certainly don't think people will be moved against their will. And we saw video last night of refugees being pulled at gunpoint onto airplanes.
Well, I can only speak for our operation, and it is our intention to not move anyone unless it is a voluntary act.
So have you then spoken with refugees and told them they're going to Guantanamo Bay?
That process will start very soon, but it has not started.
Joe, why is there no talk about punishment of Milosevic and the troops who have committed the atrocities? Why is that not part of the 5 points?
Well, I think there has been talk. I think the Secretary of State spoke today. We have said all along that there are clearly crimes against humanity going on now, and we will do what we can to provide evidence using all of our national technical means to the appropriate authorities in the War Crimes Tribunal.
But if the 5 points are met, Milosevic and his top advisors and generals and so forth still stay in power.
Well, that's not. I think if you look at what I've just said, and if there is evidence of war crimes, they will be forwarded to the War Crimes Tribunal. I mean, we certainly hold him politically responsible for this, and evidence of war crimes, no matter who's committed them, will go forward.
So wait, is the expulsion of these hundreds of thousands of people not a war crime? What? You're saying war crimes meaning only evidence of actual massacres that you can...
No, I mean, we hold him, again, specifically on war crimes. That is something that the War Crimes Tribunal, I am not qualified to tell you and to pass judgment. We certainly believe the ethnic cleansing is a crime against humanity, and the evidence that we have of that and other potential war crimes will be forwarded to the War Crimes Tribunal.
In rejecting the ceasefire, did the President talk to any other NATO leaders, talk to the Secretary General?
Well, the President has been in touch with his National Security Advisor. It's my understanding that the Secretary of State is in contact with her counterparts, NATO foreign ministers, and that the Secretary General, for his part, is in touch with the 19 nations in NATO.
There was a quick consultation before everybody agreed to reject it.
NATO has launched its 14th wave of airstrikes against targets across Serbia, Kosovo and Montenegro. The attacks came just hours after Yugoslav forces began their unilateral ceasefire in Kosovo. The official news agency has reported explosions in Belgrade as well as other sites across the country.
NATO simply brushed aside Yugoslavia's ceasefire. And so, for another night, Serbian television served up what appeared to be compelling evidence of the offensive in the city of Novi Sad. At the same time, President Milosevic was being told he would have to do much more to stop the bombs.
This ceasefire offer has no significance whatsoever unless he answers the following questions in the affirmative. Is he prepared to accept an international security presence? Is he prepared to see all his forces withdraw from Kosovo? Is he prepared to have an unconditional withdrawal, return of the refugees? And is he prepared to pursue a political settlement based on Rambouillet?
Yugoslavia! Yugoslavia! Air raid sirens wailed in Belgrade just moments after Yugoslavia's ceasefire took effect. Academics and students lined up on one of the capital's bridges to protest about NATO's campaign. Yugoslavia also took the opportunity to accuse NATO of being the real aggressors in the face of a declared ceasefire.
The United States and other leading countries of NATO are very determinedly oriented toward the continuation of the war. They are not interested at all in peace process, but only in the war and in establishing the military presence of NATO in Kosovo and Yugoslavia.
The alliance, though, appears determined not to be distracted. Overnight in Novi Sad, a dangerous operation has been going on to contain a blaze said to have been caused by yet another attack on the city's oil refinery. If President Milosevic really did believe his military move could be a prelude to peace in Kosovo, then this seems to be NATO's graphic response. Paul Royal, BBC News.
NATO has attacked a wide range of targets on the 14th night of Operation Allied Force. The Yugoslav capital was struck early in the night, with local media quoting witness accounts of 3 powerful explosions. The northern city of Novi Sad was also hit. In Pristina, Serb television says the city is on fire after a fuel storage facility and the city's airport were hit. Radio Montenegro says there have been several strong detonations in Podgorica. The Yugoslav state news agency is reporting the bombing of a chemical plant in Lucani, as well as damage to nearby homes. And there are also claims of missile attacks in Kraljevo and Pančevo. Our correspondent Mike...
NATO's response to the Yugoslav ceasefire, more air attacks.
The refugee crisis, Europe's ministers meet to discuss what to do next.
And US declared...
Right, on Sky News, it's Wednesday the 7th of April. NATO has responded to Yugoslavia's declaration of a unilateral ceasefire in Kosovo with another barrage of missiles.
Overnight attacks were launched at targets in Serbia and Montenegro after NATO allies described the ceasefire as a hollow half measure. These are the main developments. Around 150 warplanes have been in action over Belgrade, Novi Sad, Pristina and the Montenegrin capital Podgorica. Their targets appear to have been military airports and installations and a chemical factory.
Government ministers from across Europe are meeting in Luxembourg today to discuss how to handle the continent's biggest refugee crisis since the Second World War. Sky reporters on the Kosovo-Macedonian border say that many of the thousands of refugees trapped there have now left the area.
More aid has been flown out to refugee camps from RAF Lynham in Wiltshire. In Britain, nearly £2.5 million was pledged within hours of a televised appeal launched by the Disasters Emergency Committee.
Moving Kosovo Albanians away from the border to relief camps throughout Macedonia. But overnight, the main refugee camp was emptied by the Macedonian authorities. The UNHCR says it doesn't know where the refugees have been taken. Our correspondent Jonathan Charles has been to the empty camp. And joining me now from the Macedonian capital, Skopje, is Jonathan Charles. Jonathan, what's been going on?
Well, it's been a very, very busy night down at that camp. Apparently the Macedonians turned up with some 350 buses. They loaded everyone who was at the camp onto those buses. That's probably somewhere near 30,000 people. They then appear to have sent them towards Albania. It's another sign that the Macedonians just don't want these people here, and they appear to have set about expelling them from the country by pushing them across the border into Albania and getting the Albanians to deal with them. It was a forceful removal. We're also hearing reports that, in fact, the Serbs are now saying to people, you cannot leave Kosovo, all those people queuing on the other side of the border, you must remain here, you're invited back into the country. But the invite appears to have taken place at gunpoint.
So, but as far as the Macedonian picture is concerned, it's not a question of any of these refugees who had been taken to the tented camps being airlifted out.
No, it's all those people who were just sitting on the border in that camp we've seen so many pictures of during these past few days with such terrible conditions. No sanitation, very little food and medicine. It had become a very, very squalid area, thick mud, people really had been living in terrible conditions with the real threat of disease. Well, now the Macedonians have just decided that they're not prepared to have these people in Macedonia, and they appear to have set about expelling them from the country towards Albania, towards a country which is just as poor as this one.
The Macedonians are making themselves increasingly unpopular with all organisations and neighbouring governments, presumably, aren't they?
Yes, they're certainly taking a very hard line. They're not very popular with the British Army, who say they've held everything up, and they're very unpopular with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. That organisation certainly says they've had no help at all from the Macedonians and only obstructionism, and they deplore what they see as a contravention of human rights. They say that basic humanities are not being respected in the way the Macedonians are forcing these people onto buses and towards Albania.
Niš has been visited again, the main military air base around Belgrade. As you can see, it was a heavy night. It's interesting, the Harrier crews were reporting that it was the largest and most intense anti-aircraft fire they've seen to date, both in guns and...
Sky News, it's Wednesday the 7th of April. NATO has responded to Yugoslavia's declaration of a unilateral ceasefire in Kosovo with another barrage of missiles.
Overnight, attacks were launched at targets in Serbia and Montenegro after NATO allies described a ceasefire as a hollow half measure. These are the main developments. Around 150 warplanes have been in action over Belgrade, Novi Sad, Pristina and the Montenegrin capital Podgorica. Their targets appear to have been military airports and installations and a chemical factory.
Yugoslavia has closed border crossings out of Kosovo. It claims the ceasefire means it's safe for refugees to return home. But Sky reporters on the Kosovo-Macedonian border say that many of the thousands of refugees who had been trapped there have left the area, but it's not clear where they've gone. European ministers are meeting today to discuss the refugee crisis.
Hospitals in Albania are being swamped by casualties from the fighting in Kosovo. Many of the victims are children with gunshot wounds, and doctors say that medical services are at breaking point.
NATO has signalled its determination to keep up the pressure on President Milosevic with its most intensive night of attacks yet. A NATO official has just confirmed that all NATO aircraft returned safely to base. The British Foreign Secretary, Robin Cook, told Sunrise the bombardment won't end until refugees are allowed to return to Kosovo and an international peacekeeping force let in to ensure their safety.
Belgrade's unilateral ceasefire brought no respite from the bombing. Last night's attacks were the heaviest yet. This was Novi Sad, already hit 5 times. The oil refinery, which was bombed only 24 hours earlier, was set ablaze once again. Several other cities and towns were also targeted, along with the Montenegrin capital of Podgorica. In Belgrade, 200 people stood on one of the city's main bridges in protest at the bombing, a demonstration of public unity in the face of the NATO attacks.
In spite of our unilateral declaration of the ceasefire against the terrorist KLA, we are still receiving horrible hits all around Serbia from NATO bombers. But nevertheless, according to all reports from Kosovo, the ceasefire on our side holds.
The offer from President Milosevic is an empty offer. For instance, it is an offer to stop fighting against the KLA, but it's not an offer to stop the ethnic cleansing, to stop driving the people of Kosovo out of Kosovo. It refers to the Yugoslav army. It doesn't refer to the paramilitary thugs who carried out the worst of the barbarities and brutalities, killing the innocent civilians and driving them out of their homes. But most important of all, it does not meet the minimum conditions for ending this war.
Belgrade's unilateral ceasefire was declared in the hope that NATO would call off its bombers and then find it politically difficult to send them back in. But the alliance has simply repeated its demands, that troops and police withdraw from Kosovo, the refugees be allowed to return, and a peacekeeping force be sent in to protect them. Michael Sullivan, Sky News.
The thousands of refugees trapped without food, shelter or sanitation on the Kosovo border with Macedonia have all left during the night. Others spent their first night in comparative comfort in tented camps set up by NATO troops. The Home Secretary Jack Straw is to discuss the escalating refugee crisis with his European Union counterparts at a meeting in Luxembourg today. Sky's Keith Graves is in Macedonia, where there's criticism of the policy of shipping refugees, often against their will, to other countries.
For most of these people, 60,000 of them and rising, this will be their first night's secure sleep for days, for some of them weeks. No fear of a knock on the door in the night, No crowded into a bus or train, destination unknown. No falling asleep from exhaustion in the open, in the rain. The NATO camp, spearheaded by the British troops that had stood deserted whilst the Macedonians tried in vain to stem the tide of refugees, is now up and running. Though NATO commanders complain that NGOs are noticeable by their absence. So are the Americans.
It may not be much, but it's 100, 1,000 times better than what they left behind, both up the road at the notorious holding camp near the border and back home in Kosovo.
These folk, for the most part, want to go home, but not without a withdrawal of Serb troops and a NATO military presence. For many of them, the most important task now is to trace and reunite families.
Yeah, we are rather happy to get these people out from that border area to a little bit better shelters, but then another concern arises when these people are taken too quickly abroad and they are losing the contacts with their relatives.
Walk through the camp with a mobile phone and dozens of people appear, desperate to call relations to let them know that they're safe. This girl and her brother contacted their parents in Skopje. It's only 6 miles away, but they're unlikely to meet in the near future. In the camp, they're under the protection of NATO. The Macedonians will not let them out. Normality is still a long, long way away. Keith Graves, Sky News, Skopje, Macedonia.
Well, let's go straight now.
Quite a relaxed and happy scene that you're looking at the moment. The NATO soldiers are actually playing football with some of the kids here. They're handing out food. This, for a lot of these people, is their first morning of relative freedom for a long time. Unfortunately for them, it's a very nice morning here. So they're very relaxed at the moment, but underneath there are enormous tensions because up to 1/5 of these families are separated. There are children who can't find their parents, husbands and wives. They haven't got a clue whether they're trapped in Kosovo, whether they're somewhere else in the camp, or whether they've been taken to another country.
Workers are desperately trying to locate up to 30,000 refugees apparently bussed out of their camp overnight. No one is sure where they've been taken. Their camp in Macedonia now stands empty. It's not clear if they've been taken to other refugee centres, to another country, or even back into Kosovo. It follows another night of bombing by NATO planes in spite of Yugoslavia's